In this lesson, I'm going to show you some topic vocabulary useful for answering this question. In the lesson, there will be exercises to help you use and understand this vocabulary better. I'll also show you how it can be used in other topics as well, and so show you how it can be flexible. So okay, let's have a look at this question. Some people believe that unpaid community service should be a compulsory part of high school programs, for example, working for a charity, improving the neighborhood, or teaching sports to younger children. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So what kind of topics could we say we're dealing with here? Unpaid community service, it's related to work, we could say. High school programs, so education, and it's about the students, the teenagers, so work, education, teenagers, these kinds of topics we can say that the vocabulary will be related to. Let's have a look at some key words in the question in particular, because this often causes a lot of problems for some people. So, community service. Yeah, what exactly is community service? Well, it's work that people do within a community, within a neighborhood, to help improve that community. It can be voluntary or it could be paid. Community service on its own is not something voluntary or paid. A lot of people try to paraphrase this with charity work, but charity work can be so much more than just helping out in your community. You know, charity work could be cleaning oil-soaked beaches in another country, or working for the Red Cross, something like this. This could be charity work. Community service is not about that, though. That's not what they mean in this question. What they're talking about is people helping to improve their community in their local area. So that's what it's about. What about compulsory then? So compulsory, there is no choice involved. The high school students should be forced to do this kind of work, is what it's saying. They shouldn't have a choice about it. In the same way as like having to study maths and science or something. They can't choose not to do it. Which brings me on to another point I want to make. Unpaid. Of course, unpaid means you're not paid for it, you get no money, you do it for free. But some people try to paraphrase unpaid with voluntary. That's not going to work though, because that's going to contradict the compulsory part of the question. Because you can't do something voluntarily and be forced to do it, because voluntarily means unpaid, but you're choosing to do it, you're volunteering to do it. So yeah, bear that in mind. Apart from that, another key aspect of this question is high school. This is about high school students, teenagers in particular, not children younger than them, not young adults either. Teenagers only. That's the only kind of people this is relevant to. Something else worth mentioning as well is that they give examples in this question. And so the question's only giving this to give you a better idea, better background information about what the topic is about. You don't have to write about these things. You don't have to include them. They are just optional. The most important part to comment on, to give your opinion on, is everything else. That community service should be forced on teenagers, basically. Okay, so that's the question. Let's move on to the vocabulary. So now I'm going to show you the topic vocabulary that will be useful for answering this question. What we're going to do though is a gap-filling exercise, completing some example sentences. And so the words that I'm going to show you are for that gap-filling exercise. I will explain the vocabulary as we go though. Okay, so first we have averse, resent, aversion, holds, pressure, and jeopardizes. So okay, let's talk about this vocabulary then. So the first word is averse, and that's an adjective. What does it mean? Well, to strongly dislike or oppose something. Like for example, he is averse to working hard, or some are averse to shopping. So you can be averse to something, be averse to doing something. That's how it can work. Next word is resent, the verb. And this means that you're annoyed or angry because you feel that you were treated unfairly. This kind of annoyance. Like for example, He resented his partner after she embarrassed him in public. The children resented their parents when they were made to do housework on the weekend. So yeah, you can imagine feeling annoyed at how unfair things are if your partner embarrasses you in public. Or the children are so looking forward to the weekend, but then they find out they have to work on the weekend. Of course that's unfair, so they resent their parents. You resent someone for something that happened, or for something they did. That's how that can be used. Next word, aversion. So that's just the countable noun of the adjective averse that we looked at already. It means the same thing, but how can we use it in a sentence then? So, he has an aversion to doing the washing up. He has an aversion to performing in front of an audience. So you can have an aversion to something, to doing something. So that's how that can work. Next is holds. You know what holds means. It'll become clearer why I included this in a moment, so we'll look at that later. Pressure, the uncountable noun. You know, pressure is one of those words that a lot of students often use kind of incorrectly, or not really in the right way, or in the right context, or with a good collocation. So you have to be a bit careful with using it, and be sure to check example sentences that use it to make sure that you're using it in a similar way or in a similar kind of context. So some key things to notice about this definition of the word that I'm going to be using. You feel stressed. But why do you feel stressed? Because of many demands. You feel like there's too many demands made on you, or perhaps you have a lot of work. So for example, he is under a lot of pressure at work at the moment. People are demanding too much of him at work, or he's got too much work on at the moment, too many jobs to do. A useful collocation of this word then, with this meaning, is to be under pressure. He is under pressure to do something, is what you can say. And lastly, jeopardizes is a verb. To jeopardize something means to put it at risk. You kind of threaten it, is what it can mean. So, you can say, losing his best clients jeopardized his career greatly. For sure, he lost his best clients, best customers. It put his career at risk. It kind of threatened it. Maybe his career isn't going to do so well now. That's what jeopardize means. Okay, so now we're going to do some gap-filling exercises. Now, the sentences I'm going to show you are of different contexts and different topics. They're not related to the question that I showed you earlier. But this way you can see how the vocabulary is flexible and can be used in different ways. After this, however, we're going to look at how the vocabulary can be used to answer the question we looked at earlier, specifically. So okay, let's get started. So this is the first sentence. The continual use of plastic, something, the food chain. So pause the video, choose one of the words to complete the sentence. Okay, let's have a look then. Jeopardizes. The continual use of plastic jeopardizes the food chain. So okay, what kind of topic are we dealing with here then? Well, food chain, plastic, pollution and environment, I think we can say. Plastic jeopardizes the food chain. It puts the food chain at risk. It threatens it. That's how you can use jeopardizes. Next one. Pause the video and choose a word. Okay. Raising a family holds many parents back in their career development. What topic is this then? What? Family, career development, family and work. Those kinds of topics. What is the key vocabulary here though? Holds back is a phrasal verb, which is quite useful here. So what does hold back mean? Well, it means to prevent something from progressing or developing. Like for example, here we have when parents are raising a family, of course it prevents their career from developing. It holds their career back. It's like that. Okay. Many people cannot handle the pressure of running their own business. What's the topic? Own business? Well, kind of like work, running your own business, something like this, I suppose. Cannot handle the pressure. So sure, another useful collocation with the word pressure in this way, like stress because of demands or the amount of work that you have, is handle. Can you handle the pressure of something, is what you can say. Okay. Unfortunately, the areas surrounding tourist attractions become dirty and littered, and this causes locals to resent tourists. What's the topic then? Well, tourism, the environment. So resent, you're annoyed because of something unfair happening. And yeah, you can understand that about the locals. They feel it's kind of unfair that people just arrive and then trash the place, basically. So yeah, they resent the tourists for them making the area dirty and littered. Another useful piece of vocabulary here is littered. What does that mean? Well, littered is used as a verb in this sentence, to litter, and that means to drop little pieces of rubbish on the streets. Like a Coke can, for example. You drink a Coke and then you drop the can on the street. You are littering, is what that would be called. Litter can also be an uncountable noun. You drop litter is what you can say too. Okay. Okay. Some are particularly averse to stressful situations and so would not thrive in a military career. So what would you say the topic is of this sentence? Well, I guess possibly mental health, or just health, and careers again, I would say. Some are particularly averse to stressful situations, so you can be averse to something. A person is averse to something. Averse to stressful situations, you don't like them, you prefer to avoid them. That's what being averse to something is. Another useful word in this sentence is thrive. You can thrive in something. That means develop and excel in it, develop far, progress a lot in something. And of course the last one, there's only one option, has to be aversion. Having an aversion to public speaking. What's the topic then? Debate team, public speaking, skills. So okay, you can have an aversion to something. So now that we've looked at the vocabulary and how it can be used and gone into a bit more detail about what it means and when you can use it and this kind of thing, let's have a look now then at how the language could be used for answering the question that we looked at the beginning of the lesson. So here's the question again. Unpaid community service should be compulsory for teenagers, is basically what it's saying. So how can this language be used? As you've probably noticed from the vocabulary I've given, it all seems a bit negative. And sure, the reason for that is that my answer to this question was in the negative. I disagreed with all parts of the question. And so sure, these negative words lended themselves quite nicely for my essay. But you can use these words when you're answering it in the affirmative. Say you agree with this view. So what I want you to do now is try to think of or write down 2 sentences that use each of these words to either support the view given in the question, as in agree with it, or reject it, as in disagree with it. So the first word we have here is averse, an adjective. So pause the video now and try to think of 2 sentences, one for agree, one for disagree, that use the word averse to answer this question. Okay, let's have a look at what I thought of then. Although teenagers may be averse to doing unpaid work, it could be beneficial in developing their character. So that's an agree kind of sentence. I'm saying that they should do unpaid work, even if they don't like it, because it could make them become more giving, more altruistic, something like this perhaps. What about the negative sentence? People are naturally averse to doing anything that seems forced upon them. So okay, the point I'm kind of making here then is that perhaps teenagers shouldn't be forced to do this kind of work because they won't benefit from it so much because of their aversion to it, is the idea I get at later on in my essay, is what I mean. So resent. Again, 2 sentences, one for agree, one for disagree. Okay, let's see what I have. Although teenagers may resent doing unpaid work initially, with time they will realize its value. Okay, it's a positive idea. Quite similar to what I said before, really. What about the other sentence? The most significant reason why adolescents ought not to be forced into doing free services in the community is that they would likely resent it. So yes, this is very similar to what I was just saying before, that they shouldn't do community service for nothing because they'll likely resent it, and so they won't get so much benefit from it, is my argument. Aversion. Okay, I want to do something a bit different with this one, because aversion, it means the same thing as averse, and you already made sentences for that, and I've already shown you my sentences. So here is my first sentence again for agreeing, but using the word averse. What I want you to try and do now is try to rewrite the sentence, but with using aversion instead. So try to keep everything else in the sentence the same, just changing averse to aversion. Of course, you will have to change parts of the grammar of the sentence. You can't just keep it all the same. Have a go with that. Take a few seconds and try doing that now. Okay, let's see how it goes. Although teenagers may have an aversion to doing unpaid work, it could be beneficial in developing their character. So sure, you have an aversion to doing something. This kind of exercise that I'm doing with you now, this like changing the word form but keeping the sentence the same, is a very useful skill to have for paraphrasing, because quite often word forms will carry the same meaning. And so when you can't think of a synonym for paraphrasing something, quite often changing the word form will be a really good way of doing it. How can you do it though? I mean, yes, I admit it can be quite difficult, and at first it seems very difficult, but something you can do to help you with doing it is think again about what's needed for that word to work. Like, for example, averse is an adjective. Well, what do you need with an adjective? Well, an adjective needs to qualify, needs to edit a noun. Something is averse. A verb is also needed. What verbs are often used with adjectives? Well, the to be verb is often used, right? Someone is averse. And like I told you before, you can be averse to something, to doing something. Likewise, you can do the same thing with a noun. What's needed for a noun? Well, nouns, they'll need a verb, of course. So what verb should you use with aversion? And of course, nouns can also be like the result, the object of another noun, like teenagers have an aversion. Try doing it again now with the negative sentence that I show you here. So change averse to use aversion. Okay. People naturally have an aversion to doing anything that seems forced upon them. So I think it's pretty much what you'd expect from what we just looked at. Something a little bit different though, worth noting, is that I moved naturally. Like naturally in the new sentence is before the verb. Before it was people are naturally averse to, but now it's people naturally have an aversion to. So that's another little difference. Okay, next one. Hold back. Okay, I have a confession to make with this one. I couldn't honestly think of a good, effective, or natural sentence in the affirmative that uses hold back, the phrasal verb. What I would love for you to do is write down a sentence, your attempt with using hold back in the affirmative, and leave it in the comments. If you do, I will check it and let you know if it's a good sentence and it works. And I would love it if you do. That would be awesome. But as for me, I could only think of a sentence in the negative for disagreeing with the question. So that's what I've done here. So pause the video, think of a sentence in the negative and in the positive if you can. Okay, here we go. This is my sentence then. Adding this kind of work into the student's curriculum could possibly hold them back in their studies. Right, so why should you not force teenagers to do community service? Well, it could negatively affect their studies, hold them back in their studies. Cool, I think that idea is pretty clear. And next word is pressure. So 2 sentences, agree and disagree for this one. Okay, let's have a look. This kind of activity could help relieve some of the pressure teenagers have with regard to choosing a career to pursue. Right, okay. So an interesting collocation that you can have with pressure is something can relieve pressure of something, is what you can say. The idea I'm having here is that if a teenager is doing community service, well, it's basically work experience then, really. Maybe they're teaching young children sports, or they're cleaning the streets, or they're helping with organising community events or something. Well, these are all quite useful skills, and it gives them a bit of a glimpse into a career, a line of work. And so you can imagine possibly a teenager is stressed out about what kind of career he's going to enter into. He does community service, he teaches sports to little kids, and boom, he wants to be a sport teacher. There we go, job done. He doesn't have to worry about it anymore. So that could be a good thing. That could be a reason why they should be forced to do community service. My next sentence, teenagers are typically already under a lot of pressure at this point in their lives. Yeah, so the idea I'm going for here is, like with before, it's too much pressure for them and it could affect their studies. Same kind of argument, really. Jeopardizes. Okay. If the high school pupils are paid to do this kind of work, however, these potential benefits could be jeopardized. Right, so what's the idea I'm going for here? If the pupils are paid to do the work, then the potential benefits could be jeopardized. What kind of benefits? Were developing their moral character. If they are being paid to do the work, then they will likely only be doing the work to get paid, like any other kind of job. And well, if you're only doing the work for a selfish gain, then of course you're not going to be paying so much attention to the good that you're doing or the selflessness of the work itself. So you can see here that I'm arguing why the work should be unpaid. I'm focusing on that part of the question, rather than why they should do community service, but why should it be unpaid, why that's important. So, okay. Having adolescents serve their community at this busy time of their lives, therefore, will only jeopardize their examination results and futures. Like the idea I mentioned before, it's going to hold them back in their studies, so jeopardize their exams, jeopardize their futures. It will put them at risk, it will threaten them. That's what I'm talking about there. Well, that's the end of the lesson, everyone. I hope you found it useful. I've shown you some nice topic vocabularies for this question and these kinds of topics, and how to use the language a bit flexibly in other topics as well. If you like this content and you want some more, please check out my ebook on the IELTS Teacher website. You will find a much more detailed analysis of this question, as well as more vocabulary that can be used to answer it, and example sentences of it being used in other topics as well. If you have any questions regarding the vocabulary covered in this video or this question, feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Until next time then, see you later.